Hey man. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay.
Hello, this is Sam Avery with the Blackbird Film Festival. I'm talking today with Doug Roland, the director, writer, and director of Feeling Through, a short film that has been nominated for Best Live Action Short at the 93rd Academy Awards, which is fantastic. So, Doug, thank you very much for tuning in and joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to speak with you.
Well, I guess the first question I have for you is I want, before we get into the film, because the film is, out of this world and it's wonderful. Um, but first and foremost, I want to kind of connect with you on just a filmmaker to filmmaker level. You got a short film that is now qualified in the Academy Awards. I guess what I want you to do for me and for perhaps other filmmakers, indie filmmakers out there, maybe pull back the curtain a little bit. So, like, did you get an email or like was there a letter in the mail? I mean, like, how did you find out? Did they give you a call, say like get a nice suit, you're gonna be in the Academy Awards? Like, how exactly did this process come to be? Because I do think, especially for short film indie short films, all of us kind of dream like, oh yeah, that'd be so great to be part of the Academy Awards, but I have no idea, what exactly I mean, Oscar qualifying film festival, sure, but maybe you could shed a little bit of light on how exactly this happens, how one day you come to have a film in the Academy Awards.
Yeah, sure. So like the really quick version of like a definitely there's a version that's much longer, but the really quick version was, you know, this is going back to like a little bit before Thanksgiving of 2020 when the deadline to qualify and submit to the Oscars was approaching. To be honest, I knew very little about the process at that moment and really wasn't sure if it was like worth my time to submit. I just assumed that, even though we had done really well at festivals and people had responded to it, I just assumed that it was something that was like kind of out of, maybe not necessarily out of reach, but I just was kind of like not informed enough to like make it happen. So I was actually thinking, I was like gonna probably not submit, and then I ended up connecting with an at the time old acquaintance, now a close friend and colleague, who had gone to the Oscars before with a film in the short live action short category and won. And we connected, and he said, he saw the film and he was like, I think you have a really good chance. I think you should submit, and I can come on board and be a part of that process. And I guess you could say the rest is history as far as that goes. But I very quickly, got it in under the deadline of submissions. And just for filmmakers out there, there's two ways to qualify. You can either win a qualifying festival or you can do a theatrical run. And in this case, last year, because there were no theaters open, there was like a letter of intent to screen, which was basically like, essentially a cheaper way of qualifying than most years. And we submitted, and I would say you definitely allow yourself time to submit. There's a decent amount that goes into just that you need to like upload to the portal. And then from there, the first round is, I guess there were 100 and something like 175 shorts that qualified this year and submitted. And they that first round is this, getting to the short list where they narrow down those 175 to 10 films, which is really the most nerve-wracking, because you're just, there's people that are designated that have to watch and vote on your film. It's not like people are going to not see your film, but there's this feeling like you're among so many films and not just, you're like hoping people are watching it. So when we made it to the 10 and when I got that phone call, that was pretty exciting. And then we, it goes from 10 to 5 is the next round to nomination. And the nominations are announced live at 5 a.m, LA time where I'm at. So we all got up early, or maybe a lot of us didn't sleep the night before and we're already up, waiting for that. So when Nick and Priyanka Jonas announced our title, we were obviously thrilled and ecstatic. And it was also a bit of a relief because at that point you've already been at it for a while and you want to keep going, and to have the opportunity to do so and make the show is obviously incredible. We're just thrilled to be a part of it.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I know you've kind of you've talked about this idea of bringing awareness to the community, the deafblind community, and I think that one thing that also kind of stumbled me a little bit in doing this, because you're aware of it, but then at the same rate, one of the things that Feeling Through kind of has to it is that it includes one of the first films to have a deafblind actor portray a deafblind lead character in the film. And when you read that, when I first read that, I thought that cannot be true. I mean, the ADA, we're 30 plus years now, since that law has been passed. I mean, that you're not seeing representations of deafblind people left and right. But to think, and this is of course nothing against Feeling Through, but to think that now in 2021, this is the first time this has happened. It's like, what is going on? So I was kind of mind blown by that factoid, but you have obviously broken that at this point, right? And I think that the way that and I want you to share your story as to how this came to be, because I think that it's very interesting as to, how you stepped into this community and have brought this story to it. So perhaps you could tell us about your motivation behind the film, how it came to be, and kind of the steps leading into telling the story.
Yeah, well, Feeling Through was inspired by a chance encounter I had 10 years ago on a late night on a New York City street corner, where, similar to what is portrayed in the film, I saw a man standing by himself holding a sign that said, "I'm deaf and blind and need help crossing the street." I tapped him. He pulled out a notepad, wrote a bus stop that he needed nearby. And when I took him there, I saw a bus wasn't coming for over an hour, and I wanted to let him know I'd sit and wait with him. And just instinctively, in not knowing any other way to communicate with him, I took his hand and started tracing one letter at a time to write that I'll wait. He understood what I wrote, and we ended up having a whole conversation that way, of me tracing one letter at a time on his palm, him writing to me in a notepad. And it was this beautiful interaction that really stood out in so many ways. It wasn't just because it was the first person who's deafblind that I'd ever met. It was also one of the first times I was ever really considering the community in any way whatsoever. I'd heard of Helen Keller growing up, and that was about it. And I never really saw or thought about the deafblind community beyond that until meeting this man, Artemio. But beyond that, it was also just, he was such a charismatic and warm-hearted person who, was we had such a beautiful interaction. And it was such a unique and intimate way to communicate with someone. There were so many things that stood out about it, and he really left a really lasting and meaningful impression on me. And that was something that I really wanted to find a way to encapsulate in a story and share with other people.
You've also made a documentary called Connecting the Dots, which chronicles this tale. So it's really a beautiful documentary that's available online. I would encourage anybody to watch, and we can include the link to Connecting the Dots, because that's a beautiful story as well. But I'm curious to know, here you are, you've got the story. You're entering into this new community, which can be, a challenge. If you're an outsider to a community, it can be challenging. I know that you were met with some challenges from the Helen Keller National Center at the beginning, when you basically kind of cold called them, and they were like, "Who is this guy?" But here you are now. You're auditioning deafblind actors, and here comes Robert. So like, maybe we could talk a little bit more about how exactly that process went down.
Well, I needed to connect with Helen Keller National Center to cast the role that was our deafblind character, because there were no deafblind film actors to reach out to and audition. So I worked with them specifically for the casting process. And there's a gentleman named Chris Woodfill, who's the associate executive director at HKNC, who's also deafblind. He reached out to his network of people who are deafblind all across the country. We ended up auditioning people both in person and remotely. And again, Robert was not on our casting list. He was working he worked at that time in the kitchen at Helen Keller National Center, as he did for many years. And about halfway through our first day of casting, one of the interpreters in the room just suggested, "Hey, it sounds like Robert might be a good fit for this role." So he was just pulled out of the kitchen, not really explained what was happening, and thrown into this room where I'm sitting there with a camera, and he finds out that he's auditioning for a film, and immediately started cracking jokes about being a movie star, and just had such a enthusiasm and charisma that there was this instant kind of recognition that this is our guy. And it would be even more amazing to later find out that it was his boyhood dream to be an actor. It was something that he'd always desired to do, but did not think was possible, not seeing himself represented on the screen, anyone like him. And for him to, years later get this opportunity and not just knock it out of the park, but, being an Academy Award nominated film where he'll be attending the Oscars and be, to our knowledge, only the second person who's deafblind to attend the Oscars other than Helen Keller herself in 1956. It's just an amazing part of the feeling through a story.
It is. It really is. It's fantastic. I guess, to this point, you made the documentary, and I've heard you, and this is wonderful. But I think that one of the things that I would ask you, as a director, there were simpler ways to go about this story. That I think a lot of, dare I say, mainstream films go that route, right? They'll have like Bryan Cranston, for instance, play a quadriplegic, or Dustin Hoffman play somebody with autism. It isn't, currently in the film industry, doesn't even seem to be frowned upon to have, an able-bodied actor portray somebody. But you obviously didn't go that route, and I know that through your documentary and chronicling this, there were a lot of additional challenges. I guess I'm going to ask to you, why was it so important to ensure that your actor was indeed from the deaf-blind community?
Well, at the moment that I decided to make the film, it just, like, literally the next thought was I want to cast a deafblind actor. Like, it was something that came from a much like deeper and intuitive place. Like, that's the first level of the answer. That's the honest answer. It's not something that I, weighed the pros and cons, or looked at like the additional, considerations, and it had nothing to do with that. I was just, the moment I decided to make the film, one of my very next thoughts was I want to cast a deafblind actor. Then I had to like figure out how to go about doing that, but it was just a decision that I made really quickly. Over the course of the last few years, I've learned so much more about the conversation around authentic casting and authentic representation, and the many different layers and levels of why it's so important. And that it's been a continued education for me around that, and something that I'm so happy to be a part of, of the movement of authentic representation. But just for people who are maybe haven't gotten a chance to really delve into that conversation, I think some of the main things to highlight are, first and foremost, representation's been a huge topic in Hollywood over the last number of years for, all marginalized communities and all communities that have been underrepresented on screen. But as is the case in a lot of movements, the disability community is often kind of the last to kind of be considered in a lot of things around that marginalized communities. And just really more recently, it feels like there's been a lot more focus on the disability community in cinema, which has been amazing. But there historically have been very few opportunities for people with disabilities to participate in any aspect of filmmaking, whether it be in front of or behind the camera. There have been, people with disabilities make up anywhere from a fifth to a quarter of the world's population. Yet they are represented at a minuscule percentage of characters that we see on the screen. And then of those characters, a very small percentage historically have been played by actors with disabilities. So, I do think there's a responsibility for storytellers to accurately represent the world around us, regardless of genre. And part of that is including, a large percentage of the world's and population. And beyond that, you know, for it just looking specifically through the lens of Feeling Through, you know, the film, I don't think the film would be what it is without Robert's participation in it. You know, I think there's also beyond beyond the fact that everyone deserves opportunities to be a part of any industry, filmmaking included. I think you end up with a better film when you authentically cast it. I think you know, Marlee Matlin, who's our executive producer, who's been an amazing actor and advocate for many years. To quote her, she says, disability is not a costume to be, you know, put on and then taken off at the end of the day. It's a lived experience. And there's people who have that experience, that they can bring that lived experience to the screen in a way that I think comes through in the finished product and makes for a more resonant and affecting story. And I think that was the case with Robert's participation. And we also have a better film as a result of it. And the experience of making it was better. I think people really need to shift their perceptions and their perspectives around this. Like, it's not about looking at it as this additional obstacle. It's about seeing it for all that it provides, which is a lot, and ultimately a better finished product that not only is a better film to watch, but I think a better creates conversations around it that are really necessary and important conversations to be having.
You know, the comparison between roles for people with disability versus roles for minorities or people of color, et cetera. You know, it's why the idea of taking an able-bodied person and having them pretend to be disabled, you know, is seemingly acceptable, I would say, even to this day, when like putting an actor in blackface, of course, you know, is incredibly inappropriate. And yet, you know, kind of from a perspective, it's very similar, right? In that, you know, why pretend, right? Why, when you know, you can actually, as you said, have authentic representation there on screen. So there's no reason to have people, you know, pretending to be quadriplegics or whatever, when you have actors who would like to enter into this space. And I think that obviously Feeling Through is a wonderful step forward in this area. But you know, obviously we need a lot more of that to be represented. With that said, I want to also spend a little bit of time talking about Feeling Through in the other aspect of the story there, because in truth, you know, Robert's character, he, you know, as a deafblind man, Artie in the film, you know, he kind of serves as this almost like godlike figure. He's kind of entered into the life in kind of a similar way that happened in your life, enters into Tariq's life, who's the other co-lead in the film, who is a teen in need, a homeless teenager, a homeless Black teenager who can't find a place to crash. I mean, he's like, you know, desperately trying to not sleep on the streets yet again. You know, and through his kind of, you know, wanderings of the streets at night, stumbles upon to Artie. And through this communication that they have, through palm printing and kind of learning to, you know, care about each other on a different level, you know, the film also deals with this idea of teenagers on the streets, right? And this population of people who are out there. And it's interesting that you've chosen to kind of connect these two in a way. And I'm wondering if you might be able to speak to that, because I'm sure you've gotten a lot of questions about, you know, the deaf-blind community and that, but there's the other aspect of this, the teen in need, you know, element of it that I'm wondering if maybe you can speak a little bit to, and what ultimately is the message that you're hoping people come away from this film with? Because, you know, if you know, those who've seen the film know that it ends with Artie palm printing in Tariq's hand, "You'll be okay." You know, and that's kind of what we're left with, right? This kind of beautiful moment. And it's Artie, the deaf-blind character, who is really helping Tariq. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to that part of the narrative.
You know, when I think back on the experience that really inspired this film, you know, for me, it started with me, you know, offering assistance to this man, Artemio, to get to a bus stop. But, you know, I felt like I'd walked away having really gained so much from our interaction. And so much of it stuck with me, and still it moved me years later just to have had this kind of unique and intimate communication with this man that I thought was such a really charismatic and warm-hearted person, that it was really important when making the film, that again is fictional, but like heavily inspired by that encounter, for these two characters to really each have something to offer one another, and for there to be a real mutuality between them. I was also working in the context of knowing that there was this trope in storytelling that of people and characters with disabilities, where it was often, this trope that the community is trying to get away from, which is that, this, non-disabled character, that the disabled character is really only there to serve the non-disabled character, to inspire him to live a better life, whatever that would be. In this case, I wanted to make sure that they were both providing something for each other, and both helping each other. And initially, though it seems more like Tariq is assisting Artie, we come to learn throughout it really, but signified by the end moment, that it's really Artie who's providing something in many ways much deeper and more meaningful to Tariq. But moreover, that the ultimate takeaway is, it's ultimately a story about the power of human connection, despite whatever differences we might have. That's the most resonant thing. I think that's the thing that has made it have a universal message for people, whether they identify directly with the character of Artie or Tariq, or really neither of them, but still really connect with the subject matter and the story and the themes. And that message of human connection can include anyone, of any background. So that's really kind of ultimately what this story is driving at, and what these two characters from very different walks of life are participating in.
The kind of last question I just have for you is kind of back to the idea that you will be at the Academy Awards this weekend. What are you most excited about?
Well, first and foremost, I'm just so happy that there's an in-person event this year. I know that was like really hanging in the balance for a long time, and they pushed it back considerably in order to make that happen. It's also really fortunate that's happening at a time where, COVID isn't behind us, but it's definitely not what it was even a month or two ago. So it's nice. The Academy's also done an amazing job in taking, every precaution possible to make this a safe experience for everyone. And I think, everyone does seem to feel very, very safe with attending on Sunday. But yeah, I'm most excited to just be there with our team. In a normal year, I think more of our team would have been able to attend, but I'm really happy to be there alongside some of our team, and be able to really just celebrate the journey that we've been on, and just to have it be a moment where we can all take a moment to celebrate it. And we're obviously hopeful for a specific outcome, but I'm certainly thrilled about the moment and what the future holds regardless. And it'll just be nice to again be at a physical event with other people and be able to share in it with some of our team.
Well, Doug, this is awesome. I obviously have my fingers crossed for you to win this, but I got to be honest with you, having you're already an Academy Award nominee finalist, and so you've kind of already won. But of course, one last little win wouldn't hurt. So all of us here at Blackbird are, of course, cheering for you, and cannot wait to see the results, and wishing you the very best. Thank you for, of course, making this wonderful, beautiful film. And hopefully you have inspired many of future filmmakers to reach out to, other members from other communities, to include them and get some more authentic voices in there.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I appreciate it.
All right, Doug, have a good one. Thank you.